Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of What's on My Desk.
Yeah.
Bunch of random things for you guys today. On the last episode, I showed you guys a Submariner, right? And I talked about, if you're going to be collecting or buying these investment grade watches, is what to look for and what should your watch come with. You guys like that? I got rave reviews in regards to that, a bunch of emails, a bunch of comments. So I decided to bring another vintage piece on here that is also super complete and super rare. Alongside with that, I brought something very, very special from AP. You guys know I can't have an episode without showing you a super expensive, complicated, and rare timepiece. I also brought an oldie but a goodie, which is the AP rubber clad in rose gold. And last but not least, lots and lots of questions from you guys in regards to the new Oyster Flex Daytona from Rolex. So I decided to bring that onto the show to sort of show it and get everyone's input on it as well as give you mine. So where are we going to start? Let's start with the old school rubber clad, right? So I'm sure lots of you guys have seen this particular watch. It came in two versions, or I should say, I guess, three versions to be absolutely correct. It came in the rose gold with the black dial, as well as it came in stainless steel with both white and black dials. Automatic movement, 42 millimeters, a rubber bezel pushers, as well as the crown, your deploying clasp, as well as the rubber bezel. Seemingly not that important of a watch, but it is, because this was the only Royal Oak Offshore that's had its place in history for quite many years. This watch was discontinued a few years back when they started the ceramic bezels, for example, right? But at the same token, this was the go-to rose gold offshore out there. This was the only rose gold offshore out there available on the strap outside of all the limited editions. When people out there weren't ready to dish out the money for a limited edition offshore, when they wanted one on a strap, what they opted for was this rose gold rubber clad. In fact, the rubber clad period, both the steel and the rose gold, was probably the #1 seller for AP, at least for us, for probably a stretch of 5 to 6 years. Why? Because it was, again, in the realm of all those limited edition offshores that were trading through the roof, and there was really not a whole lot of options out there to get out and get a gold offshore on a strap. This was it. This was really the only option, right? Outside of some of the older gold pieces like the yellow gold offshores, but again, we're now going back much, much older. This particular example is an E-Series, which can date this watch as far back as 1994 to year 2000, right? And I've seen this watch as late as the F-Series, which is 2001 to 2007. We're talking about a stretch of 13 years on a particular model, which to me is super impressive, which means this watch was popular for many, many years, and it's still popular today. Now let's talk pricing. Back when the watch first came out, don't quote me, I think the retail was around mid-20s to $28,000, and it climbed all the way up to $40,000. And if you consider today's market, if you look at some of the newer models, some of the newer offshores that are trading, that are not gold, that are trading in the mid-20s, in comparison, this becomes a hell of a deal. Because pre-owned, these things are out there anywhere between $20,000 to $25,000, depending how complete, how clean they are. And clean is what I wanted to discuss with you guys, because the biggest issue this watch has always had, and a lot of you guys asked me about this, is the fact that it's a rubber bezel. I'm going to show you the condition of this particular bezel, right? At a glance, you'll say this bezel is in great condition. I will tend to agree, even though you see a little nick here and a few tiny little nicks on the side here. Again, barely visible. I am zooming in with my phone, but these are barely visible. From afar, this bezel looks super clean. You also have to look at the buttons, because these buttons tend to crack as well, and these buttons are indeed perfect. So condition of this bezel, the biggest issue with these is over time, these bezels tend to harden and they tend to crack. But with this watch possibly dating back as far as 15, and I say possibly, this is an E-Series, but I'm not sure from which date it is, because there was a pretty big range in that E-Series, right? What you have to look for is how shiny the bezel is. And this is what the first thing I look for. The harder it gets, the shinier it gets. You'll notice it's pretty shiny on the sides here, but overall the bezel is still fairly matte, and that's how you know that this bezel still has a lot of life in it. And the button's just the same. What's the concern here? The biggest concern is that when this bezel cracks, right? You can't polish this bezel, obviously. The only thing you can do is you can replace it, and the cost of replacing the gold version of the bezel, I believe, last time I checked, was around $2,800 for a brand new bezel. Sending it into AP, they'll replace the bezel, they'll replace the gasket. If you take this bezel off, and I have taken these watches apart, it's actually gold on the inside, believe it or not. But if you take the rubber off of that gold insert, it's not gonna fly. What I've seen a lot of guys do is replace this gold bezel with just a steel version, which I think is half the price, and you really can't tell the difference from the outside, right? But at the end of the day, if you wanted to replace that bezel, that's what it would cost you. So it's still not bad. If you're picking up this watch anywhere from $20,000 to $25,000 and you want to replace the bezels and the buttons and you're going to invest another $3,000 into it, still not a bad deal. What I also liked about this watch is that, again, at the time, it was the only Offshore that had the black and rose combination. Of course, you can look at things like the Montoya, which was a limited edition that was also black and rose. The Barrichello was a white and black dial, so you couldn't really count that. But again, for a while, this was really the only option. You didn't really have a whole lot of options out there for gold watches, and I wish it was the case today. It's not. They do make a lot more gold Offshores nowadays, but to me, this was an instant classic when it was born. It's still a classic to me, and it's going to be a classic for a long, long while. Do I find this watch is going to be a collectible? No, because they made a heck of a lot of them. I just find this watch to be a good deal for a rose Offshore from AP. That's not going to break the bank unlike today's models. In either case, moving right along, I'm going to talk to you guys about a company called Ali bin Ali out of Qatar, right? Ali, son of Ali, I guess, is what that translates to. These guys are monsters over in Qatar, right? They have their hands in pretty much every business. Hospitality, logistics, printing press, travel and tourism, mall management, beverages, fashion, department store, IT and communications, and the list goes on and on, up to include luxury. And luxury translates to them being authorized dealers for many, many, many major brands. I'll just mention a few major ones, which is again AP, Cartier, Richard Mille, Piaget, etc. So why did I start with giving you a brief history of Ali bin Ali? Well, because there was a very special Offshore tourbillon made for them as an authorized dealer in Qatar, and that's the guy I brought onto the show today. Because you know me, guys, regardless of price or whether you can afford or not, I try to show you things that are amazing. And in my mind, this particular Royal Oak Offshore chronograph is simply amazing because it's a skeleton. Look at this beautiful timepiece. Right off the bat, I'll tell you, this watch comes with a black strap. We have it on a red strap because I feel it just looks better on the red strap. So what is this? It's a Royal Oak Offshore chronograph. I've showed you guys Royal Oak Offshore chronographs before, rose gold, platinum, etc., etc. Well, they took this a step further and they made a very light version of the Offshore. This is titanium, and they hand skeletonized the dial. And again, I said hand skeletonized. This entire skeleton almost looks like it was carved out, and this is done entirely by hand. You have your tourbillon at 6 o'clock, you have your chronograph. Again, won't get into the nuts and bolts of this watch. I will show you the back because it's absolutely gorgeous. It is a manual wind. Now look at this machine. This is just unbelievable. White gold applied hour markers. This is how they make it fancy, right? They make it more fancy than it should really sound. The fact that they're white gold, get it, makes sense. Precious metal, lasts longer. It's shinier because they can rhodium plate these. If you see I turn it, you can see those things shine. So therefore, it makes it a lot more legible. Hand applied, well, no duh. This entire watch is handmade, right? So, but if you go on their website, it says applied white gold markers, hand applied white gold markers. Sounds kind of fancy, right? But just throwing that out there for you. Again, I told you guys in the past, not a fan of the deploying buckles. I'm a fan of these tang buckles. A lot more comfortable to wear, but that's just me because I have a smaller wrist. So this deploying buckle that's on this AP sort of tends to dig on the side of my wrist, right? It's the own caliber 2936. Again, I said this is hand wound. It is a sports watch, water resistant up to 100 meters, which is cool. You can wear this watch to the beach. And last but not least, what they don't tell you is how many were made. And I don't really have that information. I can't imagine they made too many of these, especially for the Qatar market, but we managed to get our hands on this particular timepiece. They do have the exact same watch in black ceramic with blue accents. This was a limited edition of 20, so I would imagine they probably made 20 of these just the same, just to go back in terms of limited edition. Retail price on this watch, $278,220. Don't ask me where the $220 came from. It must be for the strap, right? In fact, the strap is $220, I think, retail, so that must be it. But let's talk about the resale value. Again, as I've talked to you guys in the past, super rare watch, super complicated, but expensive to begin with. Not a lot of guys out there dropping $200,000+ on watches like this. So on the secondary market, you would think, oh my God, this watch should be trading over list or close to list. No. In fact, it's trading way under list. Today, you can pick these up pre-owned around that $175,000 price range. Again, relatively speaking, a hell of a deal, but still expensive. 175,000, not a small chunk of change to drop on a particular watch. And speaking of which, I forgot as usual to show you what's on my wrist, and today wearing the Sky Dweller again. You guys seen this watch before, right? Let me throw this on my wrist, all right? Now this is a big watch, it's 45 millimeters, so, you know, not for a small wristed individual and may not be as comfortable to wear, you would think, but I've worn this watch before and I can tell you that it is, and the reason it's so comfortable to wear is because it's titanium. It barely weighs anything. Looks gorgeous on the wrist. What do you guys think of the red strap, by the way? I mean, it's supposed to be on a black strap, but I kind of like the red strap. Got a little red hand on the chronograph, kind of matches, but anyway, I like it. So extremely comfortable on the wrist due to the fact that it's very, very light and it's made out of titanium. I've worn the Offshore in platinum. Believe me, it takes a few days to get used to wearing that particular watch. So there you have it, something super rare, something I felt was super cool. Let me just get one more shot of the skeleton for you guys against the light so you can see what I'm talking about. Look at that from the back, from the front. Really cool. Again, I think this watch is amazing. I think it's undervalued in comparison to its retail price, right? There's two ways to look at things that are valued, overvalued or undervalued. And that is, you know, you can base it on the retail price. Well, if something retails for $500,000, I'm picking it up for $100,000. Seems like a smoking deal, but you can't really look at that. I would look at it as a value at the resale price, right? And compare it to other things that are out there that are selling for that much. If you consider the fact that the double balance in rose gold on a bracelet today is trading upwards of $130,000 today, and this is let's say 75,000, sort of makes you consider which route do I go. But at the end of the day, you have to like this watch, right? This is a big watch, it's a 45 millimeter. It may not sit well on your wrist. It's not a precious metal, it's titanium, right? So, you know, judging value on a particular watch becomes very, very difficult, especially when you get up in the higher echelons in terms of price. Anyway, enough about AP. Obviously, a lot of attention to AP. You guys know it's my favorite brand. Let's talk about the Rolex Oyster flags, and I happen to have the white gold version with that. I don't even know what to call this gray, right? It's like borderline coffee, but it's just a really cool gray color. I brought this one because this is the combination I happen to like the most. Sorry, I didn't get that off. Ceramic pops against the black subdials. That funky gray color, which I don't know what to call, works extremely, extremely well. They didn't go cheap on the buckle. You have a full blast white gold buckle on this particular watch. Let's throw this thing on the wrist. One of the things I'll tell you about this particular watch is that it is extremely, extremely comfortable on the wrist due to the Oyster flex or the rubber strap. Here it is on the wrist. It looks cool. Very comfortable to wear. You know, I'm making it sound like this is more comfortable than a bracelet. To me, a Daytona on a bracelet, or pretty much any Rolex on a bracelet, is just as comfortable to wear as this. But sometimes with different straps, like leather straps or rubber straps and things like that, some of the older stuff from Rolex, you know, it becomes cumbersome to wear, right? This particular one is actually extremely comfortable to wear. Retail price on the watch, $28,800. You know, when it first came out, it was trading a bit higher. Obviously, new model, like anything else. I talked about this before. New Rolex comes out of the gate, it trades high. Everybody wants it, and it slowly comes down to its normal price. My expectation of this watch was to trade at that retail, a little bit over retail when it first comes out for a short amount of time, and then slowly go down and be discounted. Why? Because this is a Rolex on a strap. And historically, the Daytonas on a strap have not traded very, very high. They were always discounted. Same fate was suffered by the Sky Dweller that first came out on the strap and then it came down in value. Today, you can pick up a Sky Dweller on a strap at a fairly heavy discount, especially if you go pre-owned. But for some reason, this particular watch did not suffer that fate. You get out online and you see these watches from, you know, at retail, or you see these watches anywhere from $29,000 to $31,000, $32,000, and it's still holding strong. You would think, wait a minute, then you just answer my question, Roman, because you guys keep asking me, is this something that's good long term? Is this something that's going to hold value? Is this something that I should pick up? Of course, my answer is always the same, buy what you like. I think it's a hell of a looking watch, and if you like it, you should buy it. But the jury's still out in terms of where the value of this watch is going to be, and this is how I look at it. This thing came out when the whole hype on Rolex once again started, right? The GMTs, the Pepsis, when all that stuff was going through the roof and all the steel stuff started trading through the roof. This is when this came out. So logically speaking, people thought, okay, wait a minute. Every single Rolex right now is trading through the roof. Because remember how I told you, those hype models, they bring up the hype on every other model that comes out through Rolex. That hype is still on today. During Corona, post-Corona, doesn't really matter. As you can see, during Corona, post-Corona, the hype is still there. I just bought a Pepsi GMT for $15,000 brand new, which is damn near double its list, and sold it for $16,000, right? And this is during Corona. Corona, no Corona, Rolex is still holding. Yeah, there was a little dip. People panicked a little bit and started dumping off some of the stuff. The guys that bought the stuff to resell it for money, thinking it's going to go back down. But I told you guys before, and for those of you guys doubted me and didn't believe me, that when Corona first hit, I told you guys this market isn't going anywhere. Right? If anything, people are going to buy more than they have been. Yes, it came down to earth a little bit. You don't see Pepsi GMTs trading at $17,000, $18,000, but they're still trading at $16,000 to $17,000, right? And same goes with this. So I can't really honestly sit here and tell you that, look, 5 years from now, you're going to see this watch trading over list or close to list, because I feel that the jury is still out. This is a watch that's still being carried by the hottest selling models out there, especially the brand new Daytonas and the Skydwellers and things of that nature. And at the end of the day, this is a very, very good looking watch, right? If you look at some of the older Daytonas on strap, they weren't that attractive. This is a very, very attractive watch. The rose gold version of it is also a very, very attractive watch. Hence, this is why you see this watch still trading at list and slightly over. Just the whole combination of it. I wish they put this thing on a bracelet. I think it would look kick-ass, right? Seemingly you would say, well, when the Rolex hype is over, these things should go down in value, then I'll pick this up. But the problem is I don't see the Rolex hype going down anytime soon. So odds are if you're looking to pick one of these up, you're looking to pay for pre-owned maybe slightly under retail, and for a brand new one retail or above. But I think it's worth it. I think it's a hell of a looking chronograph. You look at some of the other chronographs from the popular boys like Audemars Piguet that are on the straps for say. So let's say you look at an Offshore on a strap, you're still paying more than what you're paying for this. And to me, just a good looking watch. So for those of you who've been wondering, I wanted to show you the watch. Didn't really answer your question. I feel the jury is still out. But nevertheless, hell of a watch. Personally, bracelet all day for me. For me, Rolex signifies a watch on a bracelet. I don't think I've ever worn a Rolex on a strap, unless it was like an old vintage watch, which I put on a NATO strap or something like that. If I were to reach for a white gold Daytona, I would go with this on a bracelet, but there's an ask for every seat, to each his own. Just because I don't like them on a strap doesn't mean you shouldn't. Last but not least, so I'm going to take you guys back to 1968 with the next Rolex I'm going to show you. As I said in the beginning of this video, in the last episode, I showed you guys an old school gold Submariner with a blue dial, right? And I talked about collectability, investment type watches. And again, they're not investments, but I said if you're gonna look at certain things in a watch as an investment or a part of your permanent collection long term, there's certain things you should look at. And I wanted to show you another one. Again, I didn't bring all the bells and whistles, I just brought the papers and the watch itself. If you didn't catch the last episode, check it out. That's where I talk about all the booklets and all the extra accessories and stuff that came with this particular watch. But I wanted to show you another one. There's so many variations of GMTs out there, just so many. You start hearing terminology in terms of dials and bezels and long E's and short E's and things of that nature, and you sort of tend to get lost. And I told you guys before, this information is readily available online. I'm going to plug my good friend Giorgio Mondani once again, that I feel has the best informational Rolex books out there. But nevertheless, let me show you this watch. So this is a Rolex GMT, a reference 1675, circa 1967. Okay, and this is the first execution of MK1 long E matte dial, meaning the first iteration of the matte dial Rolex used on GMT Masters after the earlier gilt dials, which were used from 1954 to 1966. And if you guys look closely at the dial, you can probably figure out why it's called a long E. What this particular example has, and your eyes are not deceiving you, the color of this bezel is fuchsia. Okay, and your eyes are not deceiving you. It's not my iPhone, it's not the camera. The dial of this insert is actually fuchsia.
Sensational.
Now, this is believed to be a factory paint error, as the red side of the Pepsi bezel is fuchsia in color, as I just mentioned. And these fuchsia colors were only found from GMTs from 1966 to 1970, right? A little bit of knowledge for you, right? So this is the type of facts that you can look up, because remember, all these watches have replaceable parts. The bezel inserts can be replaced, the dials can be replaced, the hands can be replaced, the crown can be replaced, even the end links on the bracelets can be replaced, as well as the entire bracelet, right? And I've told you before, there's nothing wrong with that. As long as it's genuine Rolex parts, and then what you get is a GMT with a replaced bezel, or with a replaced insert, or a replaced dial, etc., which affects the value, right, greatly. Everything original such as this makes it worth a lot more. You can pick up an old ass GMT from the 60s that perhaps has a service dial, a service bezel, or a different Rolex bracelet, something that was put together for a lot less money, anywhere from $7,000 to $15,000, depending how many correct parts are on there. That doesn't make that watch a fake Rolex. It just makes it a watch that over time had parts replaced on it. A lot of times people send these things in for service and they've gotten replacement dials, they've gotten replacement bezels right from Rolex, got rid of the original ones. Now they wish that they didn't. But again, it all affects the value of the particular watch. Now I'm not talking about fake stuff to put in here, right? That's a definite no-go. But you will find these watches range anywhere from $8,000 to $20,000, depending on what it is, and all the way up to $30,000, which is where this thing trades. These trade anywhere from $26,000 to $30,000, depending on condition. And condition is also sort of a broad range, right? You would say, oh, Roman, this bezel is kind of faded and this, that, and the other. Well, that's what makes this bezel that attractive to a consumer. I've said it before, a vintage watch has to sing to you. You look at the overall condition, you look at the condition of the case, you look at the condition, the fade on the bezel and things like that. And that's what makes this watch appealing. If this bezel was perfect, which you will never find one, we're talking about 60 years has passed since they made these, right? They're all gonna be faded, right? But some are faded to a point where you can't see any color. Some are faded to a point where the fuchsia doesn't pop as well as it does on this one, and that makes it less attractive, right? To each his own. But let's talk about what's most important, and that is paperwork. And I wanted to show you this, guys, because what you often may find this watch with is the original papers, and these papers actually come as part of a book. And if I get to the part where it's guarantee, where the guarantee is, this sort of unfolds, and there you get your guarantee. I talked about punched papers. These are indeed punched, right? They're blank. Nobody actually filled them out at the time of purchase. I guess nobody cared to, right? But what this watch also came in the past, and this is what you often don't find, is a chronometer certificate. Remember, the GMT is a certified chronometer, and here's your original chronometer certificate. This looks a lot more impressive than the original papers, right? It's punched with the same serial number as the watch, with all the numbers filled in, right? And this is dated 20 of August 1968, which is when this watch was actually sold. Let me show you this watch on the wrist. The older Rolexes was somewhat flimsy, right? Especially the bracelets, so they were a lot lighter. The buckles are a lot flimsier and a lot lighter. So this thing is extremely comfortable on the wrist. After wearing that Sky Dweller, I don't even feel this watch on the wrist. And there's that vintage appeal, right? For those that know, will know from far what you have because of the fuchsia color, right? It's a very specific color. Again, for those that know, will know. So for all you guys that ask me about collectability of certain watches, sky is the limit. There are GMTs out there that sell upwards of $100,000, especially if you get into the Bakelite GMTs, which were older than this. And again, sky is the limit. But again, you can always refer to many resources out there, online or offline, to figure out what's going on with a particular vintage piece that's out there. And basically base your research just on dates. I mean, of course, you can always email us, we can answer your questions, right? But nevertheless, always base your own research on dates, right? Because in certain dates, there were certain models produced with certain dials, with certain bracelets, and certain inserts, et cetera, if it's relevant to the particular watch. And that's how you really know you have the correct watch. Now, does that mean I couldn't have found original dial from that era, original insert from that particular era, and put it on a nicer case watch? Because a lot of these watches come beat to shit. The case on this watch is actually really nice. And that's what adds to the value, right? The way vintage guys look at cases, they look at the lugs. Oftentimes when the watch has been over polished, the lugs become extremely thin, and you can tell. This is still a very sharp watch with very thick lugs, which tells me that this watch hasn't been polished or over polished or beat up over time. So if tomorrow I found a watch, but I beat the shit dial, right? I beat the shit bezel, or even a missing bezel, which you oftentimes, and I found another watch just like this that happened to have a beat the shit case, right? But it had the original dial and the original insert. I can take that original dial and that original insert and put it into a watch with a nicer case to make it a more valuable watch, and then use the other watch for, let's say, spare parts, or sell it as is. A lot of consumers out there find that to be wrong. Wait a minute, that's not original to the watch. It is. It doesn't matter. There are certain parts on watches, as long as they're correct to the watch in the correct period, that it doesn't matter if they come from 1 or 15 different watches, as long as the watch is put together to what it's supposed to be like originally. To my knowledge, this wasn't done to this watch. I bought it all original. But even if I took 2 watches and again used the nicer parts on one watch, therefore resulting in a $30,000 GMT, and used the crappier parts on the other one, resulting in a $10,000 GMT, absolutely nothing wrong with that. So before you guys go screaming, wait a minute, somebody fooled me over and things of that nature, this is normal. This is absolutely normal in the vintage world. Now, what you can't do is replace things like case backs or cases, etc., because they all carry numbers that belong to a watch that are outlined in these papers. But the replaceable parts on these older Rolexes, which is bracelets, end links, inserts, dials, hands, even crowns, those are all replaceable parts. It would be the same thing. If I send this watch to Rolex tomorrow and I said, make this watch brand spanking new for me, they would replace all these parts, but I would end up with a service dial, a service insert, because again, this watch is much, much older. But it's the same thing if you took a modern watch today and you send this Rolex watch, let's say you beat the crap out of this watch, beat up the bezel, dent the crown, scratch the dial somehow. What are they going to do? They're going to take all those parts off and they're going to replace them with new ones. They'll keep providing you with a record of replacement, obviously, but at the same token, it's no different with a vintage watch. It's just 10 times harder to find these parts. You know, the bezels alone and the dials alone go for thousands of dollars because that's where the value is, right? But it's no different than doing that to a modern watch. So my only advice is don't take my word for it or any other dealer's word for it. Do your own research. When you're out there buying these vintage pieces, do your due diligence. Figure out, oh, wait a minute, if this watch is from 1968, why does it have a normal bezel on it? It should have a fuchsia bezel. If this is circa 1967, why does it have an older gilt dial on it? You know, or why does it have a short E dial on it? That doesn't work with the time. So therefore, this isn't original to the watch. The dial may be original, but it's not original to the watch. If you're looking to get these Rolexes as time capsules, as they were back 60 years ago, do your research, figure it out, and then you easily know. You don't have to rely on a dealer's knowledge, because at the end of the day, we're trying to sell you something, right? So where's the trust factor, right? You want to figure that information out on your own before making that particular decision. Hope this sheds a little bit of more light into the world of vintage and collectability investment like watches. And you know, I'm going to continue putting on a few pieces here and there, sort of mixing in some of the vintage stuff and sort of mixing in some particular details. To look for should you decide to get out there and buy it. Again, trying to change up the format of what's on my desk without changing up the format, right? Still showing you a bunch of cool watches, but at the same token, bringing you just a little bit of extra information. I hope you guys like that. Comment below and let me know. Other than that, that's it for me for today. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. As always, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you're not a subscriber. Go ahead, right down there. Little subscribe button. Go ahead and hit that if you're watching this and you're not subscribed. And last but not least, don't forget to share this with your friends, because this is what helps my channel grow organically. Other than that, I'll see you guys next week for more watch reviews and other videos.